I am Carrie Marshall, and I'm a progressive activist. I support Progress Texas because they keep it real and spell it out for us, what's happening in Texas politics, but they make it really fucking fun.
It's Friday, April 11th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. We've been watching the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Salvadoran migrant wrongly deported by the Trump regime's own admission to a notorious prison in El Salvador, and what the U.S. Supreme Court would say about the administration's responsibility to bring him back to his family in the U.S. Adam Liptak at the New York Times says the nation's high court has spoken on the matter, but may have responded in a bit of a half measure, as they've backed part of a trial judge's order that had required the government to, quote, facilitate and effectuate the return, unquote, of Mr. Abrego Garcia, but stopping short of actually ordering his return and a potential abdication of their authority over the executive branch. The case now returns to that trial court, and whether and when Mr. Abrego Garcia will be brought back to his home remains unclear. Texas has become a primary staging ground for Trump's deportation efforts, and we're learning of another Texas connection to the Abrego Garcia case. Avery Travis at KXAN TV in Austin talked to local attorney Lucia Curiel, who represented Abrego Garcia a few years back in his asylum application and another form of relief called withholding of removal, which prevents someone from being deported to their home country if there is a probability they could be persecuted there. A judge found that to be the case and approved Abrego Garcia's petition for asylum, another reason for the urgency of his return. Curiel says she's been in daily contact with Abrego Garcia's wife, of whom she says, quote, she's in understandably just a state of desperation, unquote. Along that same line, a new trend featuring the quiet cancellations of the visas of foreign students at Texas universities has continued to pick up pace. Lucio Vasquez at KERA in Dallas writes that just over the last few weeks, at least 115 students and recent graduates in Texas have had their legal status changed by the U.S. Department of State, connected to a nationwide crackdown on student activism at public college campuses. So far, at least 19 international students at Texas A&M have had their visas revoked, along with 62 at the University of Texas's various campuses around the state, at least 4 at Texas Women's University, 3 at Texas Tech, and 27 at the University of North Texas in Denton. In many cases, the Trump regime has offered little to no explanation for the revocations, as these students are thrust into sudden deportation proceedings, including surprise arrests. Not all of these folks have even been directly tied to on-campus protests. It appears to largely be open season on international students. Voting rights advocates are concerned about a bill that appears to be well on its way to becoming law, led by Central Texas MAGA Congressman Chip Roy. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, aka the SAVE Act, will require voters in federal elections to bring a U.S. passport, military identification card, or any ID that is consistent with real ID requirements as proof of citizenship status in order to register to vote. For some folks, a birth certificate, hospital record, or similar form might be all they have. And that presents one of the issues. People who, via marriage, adoption, or other circumstances, have names that are different as adults than they were at birth might have trouble here. The bill is ostensibly designed to stop undocumented immigrants from voting, but there are already laws that do that. The SAVE Act essentially erects additional barriers to voting that are likely to create red tape for eligible voters. The bill passed largely on party lines, with one Texas Democrat, Henry Cuellar, voting with the Republicans. Texas Democratic Party Chair Kendall Scudder commented on Twitter, quote, "We're no strangers to attempts to undermine the right to vote. Since our founding, there have always been those who try to divide us through fear and misinformation. The so-called SAVE Act is just the latest chapter in a long history of regressive politics aimed at restricting our freedoms," unquote. The SAVE Act now heads for the Senate, where its prospects of passing are solid. I'm one of the people who this may affect myself. As an adopted kid, my name changed years ago, so I plan to look into whether the SAVE Act will cause issues for me. Recommend the same if that's the case for you, for whatever reason. As the old saying goes, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. The Trump administration is using water as an excuse to pick even more fights with Mexico. Reuters reports that our southern neighbor and top trade partner is now threatened with more sanctions and tariffs as Trump accuses Mexico of, quote, stealing the water from Texas farmers, unquote. This refers to the 1944 treaty in which Mexico agreed to send 1.75 million acre-feet of water to the U.S. from the Rio Grande through a network of interconnected dams and reservoirs every 5 years. And Mexico is indeed behind on that agreement, having sent less than 30% of that volume in the current 5-year cycle, which ends this fall. But as we all know, water is a finite and ever more scarce commodity, and Mexico cannot create water out of thin air. But still, Texas Republicans have publicly accused Mexico of being chronically delinquent in its water deliveries and flagrantly ignoring that treaty. Man, all of that, and we're just getting around to the outcome of Budget Day in the Texas House yesterday. Roughly $337 billion two-year spending plan was approved in the early morning hours of this Friday after a 13-hour debate session, a few notable outcomes of which include an amendment from Democratic Representative Mary Gonzalez cutting $1 billion in funding for the Texas Lottery Commission and for economic development and tourism in the governor's office. An amendment by Republican Representative Tom Oliverson to take $70 million out of state Medicaid spending and give it to so-called crisis pregnancy centers, which are now branded as Thriving Texas Families, and an amendment directing the Texas Department of Public Safety to conduct a study of religious leaders in Texas who have been involved in child sex abuse. No surprise that a lot of what the badly outnumbered Democratic minority proposed was batted down, including the ever-present attempts at Medicaid expansion and the boosting of funding for public schools, but curiously also Democratic efforts to expand rural broadband, and perhaps less curiously, a proposal to carefully track the economic damage that Texas is likely to sustain over the next 3.5 years of Trump tariffs and federal firings. Nevertheless, Texas Democrats are fired up under new leadership, and this weekend provides an opportunity and an up-close look at what's cooking. The Texas Progressive Caucus will provide a live stream of its first quarter general meeting tomorrow, Saturday, April 12th, starting at 12 noon. Featured speakers include Caucus President Clayton Tucker, the aforementioned Kendall Scudder, chair of the Texas Democratic Party, State Senator Roland Gutierrez, Jason Ray, secretary of the Democratic National Committee, and more. Link to RSVP is in the show notes. And coming up on Monday, action at the Capitol on an ugly bill that needs stopping. Progress Texas Advocacy Associate Tatum Owens says House Bill 5580, the companion to SB 8, which has already passed the Senate, is being heard on Monday in the House Subcommittee on County and Regional Government. It would force local law enforcement in certain counties to act as federal immigration enforcement, diverting resources away from actual public safety issues. The Texas Civil Rights Project has provided a remote action guide and a testimony toolkit if you can make time to show up and represent on Monday. See those links in the show notes as well. Progress Texas is proud to welcome San Antonio Mayor Ron Nierenberg as our guest for a live podcast taping at our Party for Progress on Tuesday, May the 6th, and you're invited. We look forward to a long overdue visit to Alamo City. Again, mark that date, Tuesday, May 6th, live pod taping with Mayor Ron Nierenberg and good fun with you in San Antonio. See the show notes and get your tickets right now. Thanks to Austin Kaplan and the Kaplan Law Firm, Julianne Reeves, Tracy Miller, and Will Judy for their generous support. Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, but they far outmatch us in funding. Oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups spend a lot of money keeping their audiences in the dark. If you've come to appreciate the light we shine on important political news in Texas on a daily, ongoing basis, please know that our regular, everyday listeners form the backbone of our funding here. If that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate like Pam Bingham, Lionel McCall, and Marvin Hecker all have lately. Thanks for joining the team, y'all. While you're at the website, be sure and hit the web store for the merch to match your progressive values. Y'all means all revolution, and our most popular Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts are all union printed right here in Texas and all waiting for you at progresstexas.org. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Friday, April 11th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.